class. I hope everyone's doing okay. My name's Ian, and today we're going to be talking about neurodivergence as a co-cultural group in the United States. And we'll be doing that by using co-cultural theory and social identity theory. So, to start, in American society, communication norms are often perceived as neutral and universally applicable. Behaviors such as sustained eye contact, rapid verbal response, and social fluency are frequently interpreted as indicators of competence and overall professionalism. However, these expectations are socially constructed and historically shaped by dominant institutions. In a 2017 article written by, I have it written down, Scott Jashik for Inside Higher Education, historian Charles Dorn discusses how American higher education evolved across multiple institutional sectors, each claiming to promote the common good. Yet throughout history, institutions often define the public in narrow or exclusionary ways. And this will tie in because well, these institutional definitions of legitimacy help establish dominant communication standards that continue to shape American professional culture. So today I will examine neurodivergence as a co-cultural group within the United States. First, I'll go into what neurodivergence is. Then I'll apply co-cultural theory and society identity theory to analyze how these neurodivergent individuals navigate communication norms. And then we're going to look at my MIT source. So let's get into it. So what is neurodivergence? So before even applying the theories, it's important to define neurodivergence. Neurodivergence often refers to natural variations of neurological, your brain, development and cognitive functioning. So it includes conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other differences in information processing. So people's brain just works a little differently than ours. Rather than viewing these differences solely through a medical or deficit based framework, the neurodiversity perspective frames them as a form of cognitive diversity within the human population. However, while neurological variation, it is natural, its social interpretation is shaped by like a dominant cultural expectations. Not everybody really knows how to act and work with people who are neurodivergent. While institution privilege specific communication styles, neurological differences become socially significant. With that definition established, we can now examine how institutional history actually shapes these expectations. So we'll go into that. So now we're going to be looking at institutional norms and the common good. So in this interview that we got for the MIT source, Dorn explains that although institutions consistently claim to serve the common good, which is the wellness of everybody, so that includes neurodivergent people, just everybody. Access was honestly often restricted. Women's colleges, historically black colleges, and community colleges emerged in response to exclusion from dominant institutions. This historical pattern reveals an important dynamic, which is dominant institutions define standards of legitimacy while marginalized groups advocate for reform and create alternative spaces. Over time, institutional standards extend beyond higher education into broader American culture. Communication behaviors associated with efficiency, confidence, and social fluency become markers of competence. So, neurodivergent individuals frequently enter these institutional environments where communication expectations were not designed for neurological diversity in mind, which can be really, really hard for people who have autism, who um, anything auditory processing, it's just different. And as a result, communicative differences is often interpreted as a deficiency. They see it as something not working right and almost unnatural, which is far from the truth. So to better understand this dynamic, we turn to the co-cultural theory. So with the co-cultural theory applied, we'll start what culture theory is. It basically explains communication dynamics between dominant groups and marginalized communities. It suggests that members of underrepresented groups must strategically navigate dominant norms in order to gain social or professional acceptance, which can be really hard. Neurodivergent individuals function as a co-culture group because prevailing American communication standards reflect neurotypical expectations. Dominant norms often prioritize sustained eye contact, rapid conversational pacing, and indirect social cues. Uh, and that can be really hard for neurodivergent communication because that includes a lot of direct language, alternative eye contacts, from what we know, or sensory processing responses. It, they just process differently. So when institutional systems privilege one communicative style, individuals may adopt assimilation strategies. Um, One widely recognized example is masking, which is the suppression of natural communication behaviors to conform to dominant expectations. These people try to form to what they think is right, but when really the right, it's just not fair because everything should be accepted. And through the lens of cult cultural theory, masking reflects structural power dynamics embedded within institutional culture rather than individual inadequacy. So, however, communication strategy does not fully explain group dynamics. So, to understand how identity and status are shaped, we can now look at the social identity theory. Um, so, social identity, it's a theory that explains how group membership shape self concept and intergroup relationships. So, first, social categorization occurs when society labels individuals as neurotypical or neurodivergent. These categories are reinforced through educational systems and diagnostic frameworks. Second, social identification occurs when individuals align with these identities. So, like in recent years, digital advocacy networks have strengthened collective neurodivergent identity. Third, social comparisons often involves evaluating one group relative to another. Dominant culture frequently positions neurotypical communication as the standard against which other styles are measured. This comparison influences perceptions of competence and personal legitimacy, which can be hard. Research such as Mazur Sheriff's Roberts Cave experiment, which we talked about, demonstrates how quickly in group and out group distinctions form when groups perceive difference um, or competition. While neurodivergence does not represent competition over physical resources, there can be perceived competition over workplace status, like oral accommodations or institutional recognition. It can be so messy. But yeah, like such comparisons can reinforce like a hierarchy within work and socially between one another, and that impacts self-esteem. And self-esteem for someone who is neurodivergent can be really hard because they might not know how to communicate that or work with these people, and they want to conform as well when they should have their own form, which can be hard. Um, but however, contemporary neurodiversity discourse challenges these comparisons by reframing neurological variations and human diversity rather than pathology. So, to conclude, um, by applying co-cultural theory reveals how neurodivergent individuals strategically navigate dominant communication norms shaped by institutional history. Um, Applying social identity theory shapes how categorization, identification, and comparison influence group status and overall self concept. Together, these frameworks work together to show how neurodivergent communication differences are not individual shortcomings, but rather they reflect constructed institutional norms that privilege certain communicative styles over others. Recognizing neurological diversity expands our understanding of American culture and strengthens intercultural competence with one another. And that's what we want to do, strengthen our competence. That kind of goes back to high and low context, but we're not getting into that. Intercultural communication must account not only for ethnic and national differences, but also for cognitive and neurological diversity within our own society. Yeah, thank you guys so much.